So from here, where do you see this case going? What is your view of how things are likely to turn out?
Well, okay, so this is a 6-week trial. I think on the New York AG's witness list, I think there's 35 witnesses, and I think there's roughly that many on all the other attorneys' lists. I think there's roughly 60 to 65 witnesses. I'll be surprised if they're able to get through all of those, because that's a lot of people in to do in 6 weeks. So, I mean, my testimony was an hour and a half. So you can only do so many people every day. I don't know that there's room to do all that, but I think everybody that's that has witnessed some of the things that went wrong at the NRA, they're going to have the same story. It may be a different story about their time on the NRA board. I mean, Oliver North's going to have a story. Josh Powell is testifying. He's going to have a story. Judge Journey's testifying. He's going to have a story. They're all going to be, but the theme of all those stories is going to be the same. The management at the NRA did a lot of things wrong. They embezzled monies. They did wire fraud. They spent, NRA monies, NRA members' donations on personal things, flying family members around the world. So this is not going to end well for the NRA. The NRA there is no valid defense. I mean, you can't claim that, all of these expenses or most of these expenses were really business related. They weren't. They obviously weren't. They've already admitted to the fact that they weren't. So you can't make that claim. And so the jury's going to see that. This is a jury trial. And I was testifying right in front of the jury. They're going to see the facts here. And it really stacks up hard against the NRA. I can't say any way that they can prevail here. I mean, it seems to me that this trial is going to go one direction and it's not going to go well for the NRA. So at the end of this, we'll see what the judge decides what he wants to do. But I think the defendants are not going to fare well in the trial.
What do you think the ultimate impact will be on the NRA? I mean, obviously they could bar, Wayne and Phillips and Frazier from working for the NRA or other nonprofits. They can order them to pay restitution, potentially into the millions, I suppose, to the NRA itself.
Right.
But what else could happen?
It appears to me that there's several things that can happen. One is I suspect. Let's assume that the defendants lose the case, which it looks like I can't imagine it going any other way. They will be removed, because if you're found guilty of embezzling funds, you're going to be removed by the court. So I think that's a likely outcome. Restitution is also a likely outcome. If they lose the case, I would suspect the New York AG's office is going to ask for restitution. Again, those monies go back to the NRA. They don't go to the New York AG's office. The next thing the court could do is appoint a monitor to come in and actually oversee the NRA and also identify any other problems that might exist. So that's also an option that could occur. And we'll see what the judge says. If the judge doesn't appoint a monitor and all he does is remove the defendants and maybe has some restitution and all the other things remain in place, then I think the NRA hasn't changed a whole lot, other than, Wayne will be gone, John Frazier will be gone, but everybody else is still there. So that will, I think the NRA is going to really struggle if there's not a fundamental change in the organization. I think a monitor would do that. So we'll see how that turns out.
Okay. Look, there's another aspect of all this I'm hoping you can address a little bit, because one of the things that I've noticed reporting on this is, especially in the gun rights movement or the gun rights side of things, a lot of people have been pretty resigned to what's going on with the NRA. They don't, there's a common belief that it just doesn't really matter that the NRA, that this is all happening to it, that, there's other groups out there that are growing or that people like a lot, that have accomplishments, and they'll just take up the slack for what the NRA loses. Now it seems that you don't necessarily agree with this point of view, because for one, you are running for the NRA board. You got on the ballot through petition. You didn't do that
Right.
after the first time you were taken off the ballot, but you are now. And
Right.
that implies to me that you think there's still good reason to go and try and change the course of the organization.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to give up on the NRA because the NRA for 150 years has been a solid organization. It's just unfortunate that the management team got caught up in this corruption because it really taints the mission of the NRA. But there is no group like the NRA. I mean, as much as I like the other groups and I know what they're doing, they don't have this scope. They don't have this size. They don't have the means to do the work that the NRA does. So I still think there's a glimmer of hope that if the trial goes a certain way, maybe, just maybe, we can turn it around and get it back on track. And that's one of the reasons I decided to try to get back on the ballot, because maybe we can fix it. And there's others. I mean, Judge Journey's on the ballot this year. Dennis Fusaro's on the ballot this year. And a guy that a lot of people know, Jeff Knox, is also on the ballot this year. And again, we kind of all talked and said, listen, let's try to get on the board. If we can't, after the trial, maybe there's an opportunity we can still save this organization. It may be too late. I mean, we'll see, but it's just hard to give up, on something this important. All of us want to just keep fighting and try to get it back to the members' hands and doing the work and following the mission that it should. And we'll see if that works out. The other gun rights groups are doing great, and I want to encourage them and support them. But if we lose the NRA, we've lost a lot in our world of gun rights, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think even now, after having lost like a half of its revenue and more than 1 million members, it's still larger than all the other gun rights groups combined.
Correct.
At this
That's
point.
Correct.
And
right.
As you mentioned, it also does a lot of the more successful gun rights groups right now, which have grown as well in the time that the NRA has declined. I don't think that their growth has matched the decline of the NRA. Was another important thing for people to consider. But also, they're mainly successful in legal fights, which is a valid, obviously, pursuit and very impactful in a lot of cases. But the NRA does that. Plus, I mean, the NRA did Bruin, right? That was an NRA-backed case.
Right.
But they also do all sorts of other things that you don't see as much activity from other groups on. Things like, gun safety training for one. They're the still by far the largest gun safety training organization in the country, probably the world, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the lobbying side of things, both the federal and state level. Grassroots activation, political spending on ads and things like that. There's just so much that the NRA does that has had to cut back on a lot of that stuff as well because of all this. But even still, remains much larger than everyone else. Of course, most of their resources right now are going to this sort of thing, fighting this case, and So I think that's something a lot of people don't quite fully grasp is the importance of all this as far as the gun rights movement is concerned.
Well, plus I think if we can get rid of the element of the NRA that has brought it to this point and get a clean slate of management members and all those things, I think the members will come back. I mean, there's so many comments I've read on things like your articles where people said, not another dime until Wayne's gone, and those kind of things. And so I think if we can clean it up, I think the members will recognize they've got a good organization and they'll be wanting to donate again. Yeah, I want to donate. I mean, I haven't donated since I've been on the board because they're going to spend the money in a way that doesn't support our mission. So, but later on, hopefully we can get new management and new board. If the board needs to be addressed, because there's board members that are on there that should not be on there, then I think we can save it. But this is a long road. This is a hard road for us to be on, for sure.